Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Alec Caberna. I just had to go and make a comment about Mike being on the show every day because today power is out at his house in Girard. So it might just be me today. We'll see if power comes back. So I just had to open my mouth. So Mike's not going to be here, at least for the foreseeable future of today's show. But that leaves the door for me to talk about whatever I'd like. And so with that, obviously, we got to go with current sports going on to start us off. NHL, Stanley Cup Finals. None of the hockey guys are here, so it's just going to be me. I get to talk about this, which I'm sure everybody's looking forward to. We got Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the Colorado Avalanche tonight. It's an 8 p.m. game. Colorado, number one thing I think coming into this, they have just been phenomenal at home. And you look at them in these playoffs. You go back to game one against the Predators. First game they open up at home, 7-2. Came out of the gate and just bombarded the Predators. Now the Predators obviously nowhere near as close to the level that Tampa Bay is playing at. But you look at what Avalanche has done at home in the postseason. They took both games at home in the first series. They took one out of the first two against the Blues at home. They ended up actually losing twice in that series at home to St. Louis. But they won that first game in overtime, and they've been also really great on the road. But then they came back, I think most importantly, that Western Conference Finals to get the sweep. They dominated at home. They scored 12 goals in those two games at home. So they were averaging about 6 goals. Well, they were actually averaging exactly 6 goals a game in their homestands in that Western Conference Final, allowed just 3 on the other side. And maybe the thing to go along with it is, now they have picked up more losses on the road than they have at home in this postseason. It's still not very many to talk about. We're talking about right now for this Avalanche team through 3 rounds of the playoffs, they have just 2 losses. And they're looking right now at a team over on the other side in Tampa Bay, who's obviously seen a little bit more than that. They've had their difficulties along the way. Arguably, though, they probably have had a much more difficult schedule. Went up against the Maple Leafs to start things off. They were able to take a road game there. It was the second one of the series. They got blanked first time out in this postseason. That, I think, opens up a little bit of concern into how they come out here in game one. Obviously, a much different team from when they were on May 2nd, full month and a half later. The postseason, as much as it feels like it's gone by like that, it's taken a full month and a half to get us to these Stanley Cup Finals. So I think that's definitely a big thing. You look at these past games with a grain of salt, especially those first series like Nashville against Colorado, Lightning against the Maple Leafs. It took a while for these teams to find their momentum. Obviously not for Colorado. They were just right out of the gate immediately. Phenomenal to see, actually. They've been pretty fun to watch if you've had the chance to take a look over there. But the Lightning, they got a tough series. And I think what that does, that opening game, I think Colorado's especially going to go look in that series. What made the Maple Leafs so dangerous? How were they able to get past this Lightning team that we've seen now play pretty well in their last 2 series? And what the Maple Leafs did, they were fast, they were physical, they took a lot of shots. And that's the one thing coming into this series, Colorado's been taking a lot of shots, and they've been hitting a lot of them too. So that really opens up the door. I mean, the Lightning, they've been playing with one of the best goalies in all of hockey, in Andrei Vasilevsky. And we've seen him get exposed quite a few times in this postseason, maybe not as many as we would have liked to see. He dominated against the Panthers, but then he saw it right back against the Rangers. He led up a couple of games where you're like, I don't know if that's going to translate well into the Stanley Cup final. That's where on the other side for Colorado, you haven't seen the same struggles defensively in their games. They've had a couple where it's like, ooh, you got close there, but Pavel Francouz has been just phenomenal for the Avalanche in this entire postseason. So I think when you look at the defensive side of things, I really got to say the Avalanche should have an advantage here, mainly just I think because of the speed that they bring to the table with all their athletes. They're just such a talented team, and we've seen their offense in this postseason just be absolutely amazing. I mean, they've scored 4 goals or more in more games than you can really have expected them to. Let's say they've scored 5 goals in a game, more games than they've lost in just 2 of the series. By the way, they did that. So this has been a really phenomenal stretch for the Avalanche coming into game 1 tonight. I think it's got to be the offense of Tampa Bay that brings in the biggest question mark of the night. Can their offense keep up with Colorado, because so far that's been the question mark. Edmonton had a couple of games where it looked like they were going to stay right there, but the Avalanche still pulled away. Tampa, we know they're going to bring the defense. We've seen that all postseason. That's going to continue. The biggest thing is, can they score as much as Colorado has? And that's the part I don't know about. And this is a team that they've got back-to-back titles. They know what they're doing. They got experience. But it doesn't mean, they're question mark free coming into this game. There's a lot of things to consider. I mean, this is a Stanley Cup Finals. They haven't done it against Colorado, and Colorado really feels like the team that's up and coming in the NHL. They're here. They're making their noise now, and, comments over the weekend where Tampa's over there trying to claim the dynasty. We're over here trying to start a legacy. So you do have two completely different sides of the coin here between these two teams. And with that, especially game one here at home, as much as I love the side of Tampa and I picked them to win this whole thing to start it off, Colorado's been great on game ones at home. And I don't see that changing up here tonight. So my official prediction, Colorado takes game one, and I'm still not set on this series. I think it probably goes 6. And it depends on if Tampa can steal game 2 on the road. If Tampa doesn't steal it on the road in game 2, I think I have Colorado going in 6 games. If Tampa can take game 2, then I think I have Tampa going at 6. It's kind of how I'm feeling on this one. Game 2, I think, is the decider for me on how this series is going to go. So, with that being said, there's my NHL take for the day. If we get Mike or Matt on later here in the show, we'll let them give a little bit of knowledge down in that department. They're a little bit more expertise onto that side. But before we do go, I want to give one more thing. According to the differential that I've been very reliant on this season, Tampa Bay Lightning plus 54, Avalanche plus 78. Avalanche should be the team to win based on my differential. We'll see if that pays off. So I am leaning more towards Colorado taking this series in 6 games, partially due to that fact that my differential has been phenomenal to pick games this year in the NHL. So keep that in mind next year when you're going to bet, especially those first few opening weeks. That differential, that really starts to paint a picture early in the season. But we're going to go ahead and move into something a little bit not sports, but still sports. The NBA draft coming up here, so no live sporting events and games-wise, but we still got the NBA draft coming up next Thursday. I won't be on the show next week for most of the week, so I'm giving my thoughts on it now. Matt and Mike will take over the show next week. They'll give you their thoughts, breakdowns more on that, but here's my thoughts on it. NBA draft, I think this is a really interesting draft coming up because I think it has the potential to live up to one of those big NBA draft classes that we talk about for the next 12, 15 years. But on the other side, I think it also has the chance to be one of the biggest busts. And I know that's such a cop-out of being, oh, well, it could be the best or the worst. Yeah, well, I think just my piece of this is we have a lot of high-profile athletes with a lot of big names. Chet Holmgren, obviously the biggest one in this year's draft. He has been that guy people have been talking about for really the last, 4 or 5 years, ever since he crossed over Steph Curry in some sort of skills event that was going on. And he's obviously the big name. But then you got a guy like Jabari Smith who just dominated his position down at Auburn. He looked great. He's physical. He can shoot it from everywhere on the floor. And the only thing is sometimes he's not as accurate shooting the basketball. But then number 3 spot, you got Paolo Banchero, who's definitely one of the best players we've seen in college basketball in the last couple of years. But then you have the questions about his health and how he's going to be able to withstand a full 82-game schedule. And I think that's the one thing going into these NBA draft here on June 23rd, next Thursday. I think if you're going to see one guy's name fall in the draft, it's Paolo Banchero. And I think that's only because scouts are going to be concerned about his health problems. And, he's been able to manage it just fine. And I hope it doesn't impact him because that could end up stealing a great career from this kid. Because I really do think he's a great athlete coming out of Duke. But at the same time, we have seen scouts be wary of medical problems and issues in the past. That's what happened a couple of years ago. Michael Porter Jr. was coming off a couple of back injuries. Scouts got concerned. He was originally a top 5 pick when he had committed to Mizzou. And after the back injuries added up, kid dropped down in the middle of the first round, and that's a big jump when you're talking about level of talent in the NBA draft. And the Denver Nuggets got a real steal taking him down that low, and he started to come along. Development's been slow and probably not as much as they would have hoped out of a first-round pick, but he's starting to really contribute to a good team. I think you got the chance for Paolo Banchero to potentially have that same issue of just falling down a little bit in the draft just because of some wariness off of their guys. Next guys in the draft, Jaden Ivy. I love it. Out of Purdue. This dude has been just sensational to watch. He's been such a fun guy, and everything he can do with Purdue was showcased last year. He was absolutely dominant in the Big Ten. He looked great, played great. Scouts are loving him right now. But what separates him from any other point guard? And that's the thing I think you look at with a lot of these players. They're really great, but are any of them standout guys? Are any of these guys, would I take any of these guys to start up a franchise? And I think that's the biggest thing I don't know of. We know the Orlando Magic have the first pick in the draft. A lot of people talk Chet Holmgren or Jabari Smith here. I don't know if that's the way they're going to go. It seems like the smart pick, take one of the bigs, but we saw Orlando go this way a couple of years ago with Mo Bamba. He's finally started to develop, to come along, but it was a long path. So I definitely don't see them going with Chet Holmgren because he's going to have that same long-term build as they make him NBA ready, just like we saw with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He came in, tall, lanky guy, and they worked with him up there in Milwaukee to build him up into what he is, and now he's an absolute beast. But he also took him 5, 6, 7 years to get there. And I think a team like Orlando that has been down for so long, they got rid of Vucevic, their big guy down low, I think earlier this year or last year in the offseason. I think they're looking at something new, and I don't think they go the same way they always do. I think you might get a shot out of the gate here to open up the pick, and I honestly think they go with either a small forward or a shooting guard, because the big thing with Orlando, they just don't seem to have any offense. We know they got a decent defense down there, but it seems at times the offense just lacks. And I think they go somebody offensive here that can just absolutely dominate scoring. And when you look at scorers in the nation, it was Benedict Mathurin, one of the best guys we saw shooting the basketball this last season. So I got to go with Benedict Mathurin as this potential draft pick to start off the draft. And seems a bit odd to go that far down in the list to get the first guy, but he's already drawn some comparisons to Tim Hardaway Jr., 6'6". He can jump out of the building, and people obviously are loving that with Anthony Edwards, the way he can dunk the basketball. He may not get up as high as Edwards, but he can still do his stuff, and then he works really well from the outside, and I think that excites a lot of people. For a team in Orlando, I think they're looking for a little bit of pop and circumstance. I just got Mathurin probably heading at that number 1 spot in this year's NBA draft. So number 2 team taking the pick here, Oklahoma City. I like the way they're building. They got Pokusevski with a late pick last year. I think they go big again, same way Cleveland has kind of done these last couple of years, start building up like New York City was when they were developing. Chet Holmgren seems like the easy pick. You're going number 1 player on the board. It's got to be Chet Holmgren for this team because he fits, I think, what they've got started down there. Maybe not perfectly, but I think this is one of those guys that we're going to be looking at for a couple of years, and he's going to give some surprise. His NBA comparisons currently, Evan Mobley, Kristaps Porzingis. I think that's fair. I think he's kind of a mix between the two. I don't think he has the physicals yet of either one of those guys, but he's definitely shown the shooting ability and the defensive ability as well. And that's what he's going to get drafted for this high up in the draft. Teams are going to hope that offense develops, but they're going to rely on his defense just to sit in there while he gets that offense up to the NBA level. Next team after that, Houston Rockets, predicted right now with Paolo Banchero via Bleacher Report and written by Jonathan Wasserman, put together a full 2-round projection. He had Paolo Banchero going 3rd. I think that seems like a good pick for Houston. Houston, I think they're going to look to go a little bit bigger than they did with the James Harden look that they had a couple of years ago. Keep things big, keep things physical for this team. Building out, I think it's important to get the physical aspects down of a team before you really get into going big in the point department, because we saw last time for Houston when they were competing, the one thing that lacked outside of their offense had big struggles, which did happen, was they just lacked defense. They went up against Golden State with an offensive mindset, and they couldn't outshoot them. And we're looking at a Western Conference again that looks like it's a pretty offensive-heavy area. So I think when you go for Houston to rebuild here, they're going to keep it with defense. I like Paolo Banchero or Jabari Smith. Either one of those guys I think is a perfect pick for Houston as they go defensive here. And both those guys can also score the ball fantastically. They showed it so in the ACC and SEC. They were some of the top scorers in college basketball. You're not going to get much better than either one of those guys. Fourth pick, Sacramento. We've seen them make a lot of moves this past season. Halliburton's gone. They really got rid of some of the big guys that looked like was going to be rebuilding. So it does make sense for them to look back to a guard to refill that spot. And obviously, highest guard on the board, Jaden Ivy. He seems like the kind of guy, if you're going to look to build around, you want a point guard to do it. You already got your defensive side locked down. Now you can go for that point guard spot to kind of lock things down for the next couple of years. I think this is a great move, taking Jaden Ivy off the board early at the 4 spot. Number 5, Detroit Pistons. They've been taking a lot of forwards recently. They've started going big. I think obviously right now they're looking at Keegan Murray, who I think is a good option there. He can score. He's got great defensive skills as well. But if they don't go Keegan Murray, there's a chance he's already off the board here. A lot of great guys in these top 10s that potentially could get moved early. If they don't go towards Keegan Murray out of Iowa, I like either Shaedon Sharpe for them or Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin. I think both those guys open the door to a lot of scoring options for Detroit. We've seen their defense really step up. Now it's time for them to reintroduce the offensive side of their game because they had some great moments last year and it looked for a little bit like they might have had a chance to make some noise at some point, but it did fall apart pretty quickly. I don't think they currently have the offense to compete in this Eastern Conference. They went 23-59, and they only had 104 points per game, which was one of the lowest totals in the NBA. No team that made the playoffs out of the Eastern Conference had below 107 points per game. The lowest was actually Cleveland, who made the play-in tournament at 107.8 points per game. The highest team that actually made it past the play-in tournament with Brooklyn and Atlanta. Both teams were over 112 points per game. Philly and Toronto were still at 109 points per game. Those were the lowest point per game totals, and you saw neither one of those teams really made all that noise. You have to be able to score the basketball in today's NBA. That's the way Detroit should look to go here with the number 5 pick. Now, going into 6 through 14, I think what really opens the door. This is where you're going to see some change-ups along the way. Indiana Pacers got the first pick. They sent out LeVert last year up to Cleveland. No Oladipo out there anymore. Looks like they're trying to find that shooting guard. If Shaedon Sharpe's or Benedict Mathurin on the board, I think they go that way, number 1. If they're not, good chance for Dyson Daniels here, a G League Ignite player right now. He's a number 2 rated point guard on the board behind Jaden Ivy. I like the move potentially to bring in that guard position because they've been lacking, I think, direction down there. They were trying to work with Sabonis. Don't know if that's really working out. Kind of feels like it's complete rebuild time for the Pacers. Tear it down. Let's try this again. See what we can get coming out of it. Went 25-57 last year. Offensively, they were fine. 111 points per game. That's going to get you to the NBA playoffs, as we see currently with other teams getting in there. But defense, they allowed 114 points per game, which was tied for the worst in the Eastern Conference and tied for the second worst in all of the NBA last year. So a lot of calls for defensive guards. And I think when you look defensive guards in this game, Dyson Daniels or Shaedon Sharpe, really I think the guys you have to look at in that department. If you're going to go small forward a little bit bigger, if Benedict Mathurin's on the board, you have to go there. AJ Griffin out of Duke, though, kind of a silent guy sitting there behind Paolo Banchero and Mark Williams, but he's got a lot of upside for this team. And he's got a pretty good defense. He's 6'6", 222. He's going to bring you a defensive edge at the small forward position. So I do kind of like that spot in there for the Indiana Pacers. At number 7, Portland Trailblazers. And I think this might be the spot, actually, where you might see a trade. Because Portland, I don't know what they're doing. They have no offense. Their defense is abysmal. And I don't like anything that's going on with Portland. But I feel like they're still just too committed to Damian Lillard. They're too committed to what they have. They're unwilling to move on. I feel like they might try and move this pick, drop back, get 2 draft picks later on, or get a draft pick in a player somewhere else along the line. If they do end up making a spot, there's some calls for Dyson Daniels if he's on the board. I like the small forward shooting guard spot here for them. And with that being said, I think that opens the door. If Johnny Davis is still there, it's a must take at this part of the draft. I think getting Johnny Davis at the 7 spot for Portland really is. He's only rated 11th best player in the draft. But you look at his scoring ability, I think he has maybe the largest offensive upside in the draft this year. Other than that, though, in the top 7, we've named a lot of names so far. You got a chance maybe for Malachi Branham, Usman Deng to come out. Usman Deng coming out of the New Zealand Breakers, Australian basketball. I think there's some open doors for them to potentially go big here as well. You might see, what's his name here? Jalen Duran out of Memphis, a big center this year, kind of took over James Wiseman's spot, and they looked okay. Not as great as the first 3 games that James Wiseman had played the year prior, but still good enough that if Portland's going to go defensive here, then they go him. If they go offense, to me, it's a no-brainer, go Johnny Davis. With guys left on the board, depending on who's still there, he's probably the best offensive guy that I see on the board right now. After them at the 8th spot, New Orleans Pelicans, they got a great team right now. And I really like the way they're going. I know Matt will come up here and yell bust as soon as he can for Zion, but right now, Pelicans and Zion seem confident to put together a supermax deal for him, which means he's sticking around there for a while. So we got to plan for what they will have with Zion. And right now, the offensive game, a little lacking, but that'll come back with Zion. So I think they look more defense here. And with that, that opens the door, if he's still on the board, for Jalen Duran out of Memphis. He's probably the best big, depending on who else in the board. If Keegan Murray is still down here at this point in the draft, you have to take him. He'd be the big guy to go for. But I think Jalen Duran, the more realistic pick right now for the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't think they need to go offensive. You're going to be adding about 30 points per game offensively when Zion comes back. That's what he's shown so far. If you want to low ball it, I would say still 20 points per game. And if you're looking at a team right now that was averaging 109 points per game last year and allowing 110, putting Zion back on this offense is going to be a big switch up for this Western Conference team. And it's an offensive-heavy squad. That's going to bring you your offense. Now you got to lock things down defensively because you're going up against some great defensive players or great offensive players on the other side. 9 spot, San Antonio. Greg Popovich might not be the one making this pick. He might hand this off somewhere else because we know his time is coming to an end. So he might be the one that makes the final call and say, hey, we're going this guy. But I think he's going to rely on his assistants here and his general managers, all that, to kind of make this pick for him and shout out the direction, the future of this franchise. They've got a great unit building down in San Antonio. Not 100% confident in them, but their offense was good. 113 points per game. They make the play-in tournament. They get dropped out. But they overall, they looked pretty good. They weren't a bad team this year. And overall, I mean, I think they could use some more scoring, but DeJounte Murray, he's coming along great. 22.3 player efficiency rating, led the team in scoring and player efficiency. Pirtle's locking it down defensively at the paint. DeJounte Murray was also putting in steals. He assisted the ball. Pirtle and Murray are the 2 guys right now I think you're looking at for this team. Lonnie Walker hasn't had quite the development I think they were hoping for, but Keldon Johnson has. He has come right along and is really stepping up big. So right now, point guard, small forward, and center positions are taken care of for the Spurs. So with that being said, I mean, obviously you're looking at a shooting guard at this point. And with that, I see a good chance for Malachi Branham. He's got good defense to go along with an impressive offense. Freshman out of Ohio State. I think he fits well in a Popovich system at least 1 year, and I think he can transfer over well to whoever he gets picked up next. He picked up Chris Holtman's system at Ohio State just like that. He was on it. He shouted out as a star. He's got an epic ceiling right now, and when you got point guard, small forward, and center down, you're looking at the best available shooting guards. I think at this point, maybe power forwards, but with Jeremy Sokin being the next guy, next highest rated power forward, he's not projected, or he's not ranked until 15th in the draft, with EJ Liddell coming behind him at the 20th spot. So I think you go shooting guard here. We got a lot of talented guys in this class at that position, so I think it opens the door. Take one early. Try and look for a power forward later if you want to make in it. If you want to jump back and try and make a trade in there for a late first round power forward in there. So 10 spot, Washington Wizards. We're getting down into the mix of things, and Wizards feel like another team. I'm not really sure where they're going. They feel a little stagnant, trying to put together a team. 35-47, very young group with them. I think maybe is the biggest thing. We're waiting for development. Kyle Kuzma really did take a big step up. They got Porzingis down there, Bradley Beal as well. I would say Montrezl Harrell, but he's now facing prison time after being arrested for drug trafficking. So we'll see how that whole situation turns out. You can find articles about that on ESPN. We won't be going into it here. KCP is a good guy to have down there, but I think that's more of a depth spot. Spencer Dinwiddie was their point guard this year. He's getting a little up there in age. So if I'm going to look at this team and I'm really going to go, you need a position here, go for a position need, I go point guard. And with that, it opens the door. This is a real far back pick. He's not going to be highest guy off the board, on the board still. But I like Ty Washington Jr. out of Kentucky. Played second fiddle down there to, in my opinion, the best player who should have been in the draft, and Oscar Tshiebwe. He pulls out because people were giving him terrible grades. I don't know why. To me, he's the best player in college basketball. He won that award for a reason. He's got the highest upside, but nobody wanted him. Ty Washington was nearly as impressive as he was this entire season. He's going to be a huge spot to put in for the Wizards. If they take Ty at this spot, I like where they can potentially build in these next couple of years. 11 spot, New York Knicks. Right now, they're looking to take Malachi Branham out of Ohio State. This feels like another team. They're on the cusp of something. We saw them in the playoffs last year, but a big step back for Julius Randle. 20 points per game, 9.9 assists, and 5 rebounds. Doesn't sound like a big step back, but he had an epic season last year. Slowed down in the later half of this year. His stats were up. RJ Barrett's coming along. Fournier's coming along. Derrick Rose, I think the question mark, Kemba Walker, they have old point guards, and I think they're going to look to get away from that. They're going to hope that Obi Toppin, I think, takes over that small forward position with the way Julius Randle is playing right now. I'd have Obi Toppin move to the small forward. Let him use that size and go up there against guys like Giannis and Kawhi. See what he's really made of. So with that, I think there's another team looking for a point guard, and you got to go top available right now. Kennedy Chandler on the board for out of Tennessee. I like what he brings to the game. Either him or I'd go Andrew Nembhard out of Gonzaga. Only problem is Gonzaga had an easy schedule and a lot of talent. I show some concern taking Gonzaga guys in this draft. They have potential to have, I think, 2 or 3 guys taken in this first round. I'd be a little bit cautious on that. But I go point guard over shooting guard. They have a lot of shooting guards on this team. I think you need somebody to run the point, and that's where Kennedy Chandler comes in, a good point man for this team. Either him or Nembhard, both those guys control the flow of the game so much, and if you can put that together and take the ball, I think most importantly, out of Julius Randle's hands. He doesn't need to be the guy with 5.5 assists that leads the team. 5.5 assists also should not be leading your team in the assist category. They need a true point guard to come in there, control the flow of the game next season. After them, the Oklahoma City Thunder have the 12th pick. Running out of steam here a little bit. Already half an hour into the show, been talking pretty much nonstop. So in this pick, Oklahoma City, second pick of the draft already, and I had them take a big earlier in Chet Holmgren. I like that pick. Now it opens the door, I think, for them to really go anywhere with this next pick. They got a lot of draft picks coming up in these next, 5 years, I think is what it is. They have like 15 or 17 draft picks to choose from. So they're going to complete rebuild, which means they can really, really go anywhere with this pick. And with that, I think you go maybe one of the top offensive players in the draft just to try and get some offense here. They're going to build around and see what they do with it. AJ Griffin, if he's on the board out of Duke, I already had him off, so I think that opens up the door for Malachi Branham if he's not already gone. If not, though, a kind of a sleeper pick I like down here, and he shouldn't be a sleeper whatsoever, but Ochai Agbaji, next best small forward on the board after Usman Jang and AJ Griffin. 6'6", 215 guy, built like a big linebacker for college football, but I think he brings a lot to the game. He knocked down at least one 3-pointer in 32 of the 33 games, and 75% of his shots were at the rim. For a 6'6" guy playing in the SEC, that's a big step. Ochai Agbaji can be that next generational talent. We always look later in the draft, who's going to be that guy that's on the edge of the lottery or outside of the lottery that really is going to make that number and potentially put his name for Rookie of the Year next year. I think Agbaji has a real shot at doing that. So I got Agbaji getting taken here by the Thunder. And you look at a class right now of Agbaji and Chet Holmgren, I really like that. You're talking about picking up two of the best players in college basketball last year. I don't think Oklahoma City could ask for anything better. Next up, Charlotte Hornets. I want to see them go big here. We don't have a lot of great bigs on the board. Only two guys are even ranked in the top 15 right now of recruits. So I think that opens the door. You might see a power forward get taken here and to play center. I don't see a ton of confidence in that, but Jeremy Sokin, power forward out of Baylor, 6'10". We've obviously seen him a lot in that tournament, what he can do against all sorts of defenses. He shows out a little bit there. Probably the best guy I could see in this spot. But with that being said, I like also Walker Kessler out of Auburn or Khalifa Diop. He's not projected until the end of this first round, but for a team that I think could go big in this draft with Charlotte, look for a center. They feel like they might be coming along offensively a little bit. Not a ton of confidence in Charlotte. They haven't really been able to put together a lot, but offensively, 115.3 points per game. They clearly have found something that works, so now you need the defensive side to step up, get somebody that can play it back a little bit. So I like Diop or Kessler. If they really want to try and pull something here, one of the best centers in my opinion. He's low rated, not expected till like very end of the second round. Kofi Cogburn. Even if they can sign this guy as an undrafted free agent, Kofi Cogburn, we saw what he can do at Illinois these last couple of seasons. Absolute freak. 7 foot, 285. This guy is one of those guys. If he ends up in the G League better watch out because he's going to be making some people hurt. 14th pick, Cleveland Cavaliers. The guy I would like to have at this spot, I already had taken off the board, Ochai Agbaji. If he's still on the board, no doubt for me, that's who you go for. But at the moment, you got a potential that you might need to be replacing Colin Sexton. We talked about it a couple times already. Sexton might be on the out. We'll see what happens in the next week if there's any movement on that front in terms of an extension for Colin Sexton. But that opens it up. You need a shooting guard here. And I know that might not be what people want to hear, but I think a shooting guard probably the next best spot to look at because top guys on the board of the small forward, Terry Eason out of LSU, ranked 17th. Nikola Jovic out of Mega Mozart, European, Serbian league, actually. And sounds very similar to Nikola Jokic. Kind of looks the same too. 6'10", big dude built, but he's not ranked until 24th in this draft. Small forwards, you got Jalen Williams coming out of Santa Clara. He's ranked 21st in the draft, but I think with Cleveland looking probably more for a shooting guard in this year's draft, depending on what happens with Sexton, I see them going Jalen Williams, or I'd really like to see coming out of G League Ignite, Jaden Hardy, 6'4" guard, 190, a smaller guy, but I think he's got some potential along with Marjan Beauchamp. They both lit it up with Ignite last year in the G League, and I think they open a lot of doors for this offense. It doesn't necessarily even need another scorer, but we've seen in the NBA, you need to be able to score the ball. Cavs, they need to score the ball. We saw great defense, so I don't think you need to worry about that as much. We saw great defense even with Sexton out of the lineup, so we know they have it already. So I think you go offensive here. You can have this guy sit behind Karis LeVert as well for even the whole season if you want. Let him play sixth man, come off the bench, something of that sort. And I think it opens the door for one of those G League guys to come out and make a statement. We've seen some G League guys do great things these last couple of years. I think they were saying just about every NBA player, young guy at this point, has spent some time in the G League, whether that was rehabbing injuries or whatnot. They've been able to play some time down there, and it's really helped, I think, a lot of players get to the league. It's a second chance, and I think that's a great thing to have. So first half of the draft out of the way. Second half, this is where it gets a lot more confusing. Charlotte has another pick here. probably going more shooting guard again. Whoever isn't picked by the Cavs here between Hardy and Beauchamp, at least in my rundown at the moment, goes to Charlotte. Atlanta follows them. I think they're looking for a backup to Trae Young at this point. Dalen Terry or Andrew Nembhard, probably a good spot to go with it for the point guard position. Following them, the Houston Rockets. I believe this is now their second pick in the draft. Yeah, second pick in the draft. They had the third one. I went big with them earlier. Now I think they keep it small. Whoever isn't picked between Terry and Nembhard, likely to go here. If not, Hugo Besson from the New Zealand Breakers or J.D. Davidson out of Alabama as a point guard for this team. I think they need somebody to run things a little bit. They're in a complete rebuild. Chicago, 18 spot. It seems to be a team that likes going big. I think they go for a middle big kind of guy here. E.J. Liddell out of Ohio State, in my opinion, a phenomenal player, but I'm always going to question the size at this point. You're looking at a power forward that's 6'7" and 240 pounds. We're talking about Zion Williamson as well. I mean, being around that same size, and we're calling him not we are, but a lot of people have called him overweight for his position. And now EJ Liddell is going to be in that same size category. So he's trimmed down a little bit the last couple of years. He's seen improvement in every year at Ohio State. Freshman year, he was only going 6 points per game, 0.6 blocks. Last year at Ohio State, 19.3 points per game, which was fourth in the Big Ten. Had a player efficiency rating that was in the top 75 or top 50 in all the college basketball. He led the Big Ten in blocks. So we know even at 6'7", he can get up there, play great defense, probably has a very similar build in play style to Draymond Green and Grant Williams. You combine the two, I think you get EJ Liddell with a little bit better offense than both of those guys, but similar lockdown defense. Obviously, his numbers are going to come down when it comes to playing here in the NBA rather than college, but I think he's still a great guy to put at, I think maybe move the small forward, use him for defense in this position, and a team with Chicago that feels like they're going to be getting some offense back. Zach Levine's returning. He's signing a contract here in the next couple of days to stay in Chicago. I think it opens up the door to go a little bit defensive with things for their team. They were fine offensively, but they were terrible defensively this season. They were the only team that was guaranteed a spot in the playoffs this year that had a negative scoring differential. So that's definitely a spot they need to find improvement on. Bringing in a defensive guy like that is the place I would go in that position if I was them. I'm obviously not. We'll see which way they go. I like the Liddell pick, though, at 18. At the 19 spot, Minnesota Timberwolves. Team I really like, and they've been doing a lot, but the rumor is D'Angelo Russell is out in the offseason. That opens the door, I think, for a point guard to potentially move into a spot here. Not a ton of guys left at this position that I'm overwhelmed with. They might go shooting guard, see if they can get him a little bit more point guard-esque position with it, get a smaller shooting guard out there. And with that, I'm looking through my list here of what I got available, and I don't love any pick out there at the moment, but if you're going just best available guy that might fit your spot, I'd go Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame, a good scorer, can pass the ball decently. He did commit a lot of turnovers, so it does concern me. If they don't go that way, you might go Christian Braun out of Kansas. We saw a little bit more passing from him, and I mainly am going shooting guard here because I'm not overwhelmed with the point guards. If they do go point guard, I've already taken potentially Hugo Besson off the board. He's probably best available point guard at this position. After that, it's a real fall off down to J.D. Davidson, John Montero, and Ziga Samar. I don't love the picks right now in this position for the Timberwolves. They might not end up going point guard because of that, but I think it's the position they need the most. They have most other position figured out. If they end up going power forward like they are predicted, probably is Jake LaRavia out of Wake Forest in that spot to take over. So after that, San Antonio Spurs making their second pick. I already said they needed either a shooting guard or a power forward. With that, have their shooting guard go earlier. Power forward now is got to be David Roddy, one of the highest rated point power forwards left on the board. Only problem with him, he's 6'5", 252. He is not a big dude height wise, and I think he's going to have problem getting off the bounce. And if they go that way, if they go power forward, I'd rather see them go Christian Coloco. He brings that size back to the floor. He's only a second round rated player, but he was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year and Most Improved Player. He's on pace to become the best shot blocker in Arizona history. He really is a guy that I think could lock down the defensive side of things for the Spurs. 21 pick to Denver Nuggets. I think you got a chance for a small forward to come off the board here, and I'd go Nikola Jovic over Tari Eason. I like Eason, but I think that 6'10" frame at the small forward spot fits what Denver's kind of been building over there. They look big. They're going big with a lot of positions. I think they keep going that way. And at number 22, Memphis Grizzlies. I like what they have big-wise. I'd like to see a center, but I don't know if we necessarily have a center at that spot. Khalifa Diop or Jalen Williams would be where I'd like to see them go center-wise. But outside of the center position for this team, I'd take Tari Eason, 6'8". He's got explosiveness. That's what we've been seeing out of this Memphis team. They want to play inside and be able to spread the floor with athleticism. I think that's what you would get out of Tari Eason out of LSU. 23rd pick, Philadelphia. They got the historically important 23rd pick in the draft. With that, I think they reach a little bit on a pick. Take Wendell Moore Jr. out of Duke. He's one of the bigger names left on the board, but I think he's got some potential in that tank down there. Milwaukee at the 24 spot. I think they need to go looking for somebody a little bit smaller. They don't need to look for bigs. They got plenty of those. I think you got to go shooting guard, small forward position. I've already taken a few off the board. Took Christian Braun off last time. Bryce McGowans or Blake Wesley. Probably who I would have going at this spot at this point. If they decide to go a little bit bigger, small forward, I think a good reach. There's a couple of guys, actually, I really like for late round, first round picks, early seconds of Johnny Usang, Ron Harper Jr., or Caleb Houston, or Kendall Brown. There's a lot of early second round potential small forwards that I think are really great athletes. And I think there's one guy that's going to slip under the board out of Davidson this year. Hyunjung Lee out of Davidson this year was phenomenal. And he's going to fall out, probably end up in the G League. And I think you've got to watch out for that guy to potentially make some noise the next couple of years. I like what he did. I hope he gets a shot in the league at some point. After Milwaukee, San Antonio's got another one. And I think this opens free range to go anywhere. I don't think they go in the same position twice. Might look for a backup at this point to their guy and DeJounte Murray, which I think opens the door for them to reach a little bit. I like James Akinjo out of Baylor. Or if they want to try and take a jump on the name, Scottie Pippen Jr. or Colin Gillespie. Both guys that Colin Gillespie probably the better point guard, but if you're going for big name value, it's Scottie Pippen. You know what his dad did with the Bulls. It's a legacy type pick to go for here. I'm not sure San Antonio wants that kind of noise with that, so I think that probably a better shot of seeing Colin Gillespie go into this first round for a point guard. That's a real big jump for them, but in a team that doesn't need much, I think you do kind of look for maybe one of those lower line picks. Dallas Mavericks at the 26 spot. They need help defensively to help out with this team because we saw them just have no rebounding in this postseason. So with that, I do like Ismail Kamagate out of Paris. He's been playing overseas, him and Jalen Williams, or I would really love to see Kofi Cogburn get down there with Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson. I think that trio would just be so electric to see. It's a big reach in that pick for my side of it, but I really like what that could do. Miami Heat, at this point, I don't have a ton of guys left on the board that I'm overwhelmed with offensively, and I do think that's the way Miami is going. Their defense has just been kind of outstanding, really. I mean, they have a great offense out there, but this late in the draft, offense is slowing down a little bit. And with that being said, I would go Justin Lewis out of Marquette or Max Christie out of Michigan State. Justin Lewis, 6'7" shooting guard, and you got Max Christie as a 6'5" shooting guard. Both these guys play it well, offensive-esque guys. Golden State, 28th pick, could potentially move here if they win it all, by the way. I don't even know what this team is going to go for at this point. They got Wiseman and Kuminga and Looney at the center spot. Maybe power forward, the only spot I could see them really having any sort of need in, but they're such an offensive team. It's hard for me to see them going at that position with how things have gone, but that's the one spot I think left on the board for them. I like Dominic Barlow from Overtime Elite. He 6'9" power forward. He can score the ball decently well. He's got a good bit of strength, and his explosiveness, I think, can play better behind Draymond Green. And he's not a great three-point shooter, which obviously makes him probably not a target for this team. But I think they need to look at some more defense. We'll see what Kuminga and Wiseman can bring up next year. But I think for a team that has shown dominance, I think they just really go with somebody they can feel fit into their system. And I think that might be Dominic Barlow, or behind him as well, Michael Foster from the G League as well. I think they go with somebody out of the G League that already is getting some experience put together. After them, Memphis has another pick. This is a spot I don't know. I think maybe with the injuries to, to John Morant this last season, they might get a little bit spooked and jump the gun and pull a backup point guard for him in this spot. They don't necessarily need it, but I like Alonde Williams out of Wake Forest to come out here, or Matteo Spagnolo out of Cremona. Don't even know where that is, but he's Italian, and he's from Italy, I should say, and that's where he's been playing. Good player, basketball. Overseas guys, always a risk, but we have seen a couple of them come over, play it well. He's a good three-point shooter, though. That's the big thing. 48.6% from downtown. And for Memphis, that can't hurt them. Denver Nuggets have the final pick in the first round. I believe this is their second pick? Yeah, second pick of the first round. So with that, to finish things out here, I wouldn't mind them going point guard as well. Scottie Pippen Jr. to finish things out, because I feel like the point guard spot a little lacking for Denver. So I think that's the one spot kind of left on the board for me that I can see left for them, is getting that final point guard spot solidified. Obviously, a late first round pick might not be the guy you're going to do that. You pick him in the offseason if you can find a point guard out there. But I think you bring in some depth at that position. It's only going to help when you have a little bit of thinness in depth at that point. So there's my first round draft pick coming up on Thursday, June 23rd, NBA draft. That's the entire first round. I gave you all the picks, so you might not even need to watch it. You just found out what it's going to be. With that being said, we still got 12 minutes left on the show. We'll keep it rolling here. Go into a little bit of baseball to finish things out. And obviously, the big storyline continues to be the Yankees. I know we've beaten this like a dead horse, but their run differential is now up to 129. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They came off a big win streak. Now they're on a 5-game win streak again, and it doesn't look like anybody's going to stop them. This Yankees team, for whatever reason, they had just been outstanding. And you look at what they got going on, and it doesn't feel like it's going to stop. This is a team right now that has the makings of one of the best Yankees teams we've seen probably since the mid-2000s with those big groups they had going on. They got interleague play right now against the Rays. They'll have Blue Jays after that, then get back to Tampa, Houston coming up. But at the moment, I'm not worried about anybody they're going up against, because they've taken down everyone in front of them so far. And I kept talking about that schedule is going to balance out at some point. It hasn't yet. They've played 23 teams over 500. Only lost 7 of them, so I don't really see them taking much of a jump back. I think they're going to continue to play just fine against their in-division opponents. I don't see anybody challenging them. Toronto, maybe. We'll see what comes up in that series, but I'm not confident. AL Central, no one's stepping out to me. Minnesota looks like they're falling back a little bit. And with the way Cleveland's storming ahead right now, great things for the Guardian fan base. But now Chicago's coming back around too. They won their last game out, and now they're going up against Detroit right now at the moment, and they lead things 7-0. So they're coming in just right behind Cleveland right now. I think both teams have a good chance to finish out the month of June in a good stretch, make it close for the AL Central going into July and Independence Day when we know baseball really kicks off as NHL and NBA comes to a close. In the AL West, I don't love any team at the moment. Obviously, I've made my case about the Rangers, and I do really like that team overall. But right now, Angels are bad. Seattle's meh. Oakland's terrible. Houston's meh. Texas is meh. No team is just stepping out. They look like the guys to go out for. They're going to win it out of the AL West. Houston's had a great season so far, plus 42 in the differential. But biggest thing that concerns me, they've had the easiest schedule in all of baseball. And it's not even close. They've played just 15 teams over 500. Only 15. Part of that is because their division is awful. Awful division. Probably worse than the NL Central, if we're being honest. Probably worse. Because the Angels have completely fallen off. Texas is the second best team in there, and they're my wild card pick to make the playoffs, but at the same time, not a phenomenal team. I picked them because it's an easy division to get in place to. Houston has 15 games against top opponents. Cleveland, they're the second team that's got an easy slate. They've had 18. Tampa behind them, or Tampa just in front of them at 20. So Houston's had it easy so far. And I don't see that. They're going to have the Yankees coming up in a couple of weeks. That's going to shoot them back down to earth potentially. I mean, they could be using this, though, as a stepping stone. But the fact they're 4-6 in their last 10, I'm not confident what they can do against a team like the Yankees right now. NL East, Atlanta's still streaking. We'll see how the injury to, I believe, Acuna can work in there. No, pardon me, Ozzy Albies can work with them. We'll see how that continues to develop. We talked about this division a little bit yesterday. Bottom three teams, I know guys like the Phillies. They're 8-2 in the last 10. They are heating back up. I just don't have confidence on a prolonged run for them. They made the manager change. It gave them some momentum. I want to see it get past that honeymoon phase. Miami, 7-3 in their last 10. Not bad. I'm glad to see them coming up. This should be a competitive division. It just hasn't been because I don't really see an overwhelmingly bad team here. Washington should not be as bad as they are. Negative 96 in the run differential. They've been just freaking terrible. They shouldn't be that bad. They have great players. Juan Soto, I mean, the big one, obviously. The Matt said, potentially getting traded on yesterday's show. This should be a competitive division, and it's just not at the moment. Atlanta, I think, is going to make it interesting here in a minute. NL Central, as we talked about, pretty terrible overall. Pittsburgh's now lost 9 in a row. Chicago's lost 8. Cincinnati, if they can win today against Arizona and the Cubs lose to San Diego, which seems likely, Cincinnati's out of last place. Keep in mind, they started this season with 2-19, and here they are, month and a half, 2 months later, now moving out of last and only 13 games out of first, 12 and a half games out of the wild card spot. They're not in a terrible spot right now if you're Cincinnati. They can move out of the spot in such a terrible division. They can move. NL West, Dodgers, they're falling a little bit. 4-6 last 10. They did win last time out. Give them credit there, but they're playing the Angels, so not overly concerned about it. San Diego, 7-3 in their last 10. Now they have Chicago coming up as well. Good spot to potentially take over the number 1 spot in the NL West. We saw them take that spot a little bit last year in the early season before falling off. Hope they can avoid that this year and make it interesting. San Francisco, though, still in the mix right behind them. They've now won it 5 in a row, 7-3 in their last 10. They got just as good of a spot of overtaking the Dodgers. Unfortunately, for any movement here, all three of them have easy opponents. You got the Dodgers taking on the Angels, which shouldn't be an easy opponent, but right now, you're not counting on that team to win. So, Dodgers got Angels. San Diego's got the Cubs. I'm not counting on the Cubs to win anything. And San Francisco's got Kansas City, worst team in the AL Central. They've lost 4 in a row. Don't have confidence on them taking down San Francisco. Arizona behind them, still only 6 games under 500. They got Cincinnati coming up, winnable-ish. We've definitely seen Cincinnati look like the better team recently, but who knows? This could be a little bit of a switch up here, give some momentum back to Arizona. Statistically on paper, they are the better team. in some department. Pitching-wise, mainly, is where they're a little bit better. Cincinnati is the better hitting team. But Colorado in the 5 spot. They got Cleveland coming up. I think this is a good spot for the Guardians to take a jump ahead and continue to close into Minnesota, especially on a win streak right now. They've been hot as of late. And Colorado, 4-6 in their last 10. So there's an entire rundown of Major League Baseball, an entire rundown of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, an entire rundown of the NBA first round. I've given you all here on the show. I've been Alec Caberna. No Matt, no Mike. I should say
no.
Matt.
N-O, no.
And no Mike. So that does it here for the Casual Sports Podcast today. I've been Alec Caberna. Hopefully, we'll have guys on the show tomorrow besides just me, or it might just be getting more of me rambling on. We'll see how things go. Power Hour, though, coming up next on your sports network. Class B baseball, Field of Dreams baseball, and I think Scrappers potentially tonight, all on the network, so don't forget to tune in. That's been it here for me, though. I'll see you tomorrow.